What if I told you that one man, the leader of a desert nation, was rumored to be secretly one of the wealthiest people on the planet? This isn't a fantasy novel or a blockbuster film script. This is the very real story of Muammar Gaddafi, the man who ruled Libya for 42 years and styled himself the King of Kings of Africa. For over 4 decades, he presented to the world the image of a humble Bedouin revolutionary, a simple man of the people, born in a desert tent. But behind the theatrical military uniforms, the all-female Amazonian Guard, and the fiery hours-long speeches, Gaddafi was allegedly building one of the largest and most secretive private fortunes the world has ever seen. It was a fortune built on his nation's greatest natural resource, but controlled with an iron fist. While the most sensational estimates placed his hidden wealth at a staggering $200 billion, a figure that remains highly debated, the wealth that was eventually discovered is mind-blowing on its own. While his people lived under the thumb of an oppressive and often brutal regime, Gaddafi allegedly presided over a clandestine financial empire that spanned the entire globe. How did one man, born to a poor goat herder, manage to siphon off so much of an entire nation's wealth? What secret methods and loyal enablers did he use to build, hide, and move this colossal fortune across continents? And the biggest question of all, after his dramatic and violent fall from power during the Arab Spring, where did all that money go? This is the story of Gaddafi's money, a sprawling tale of oil, absolute power, and staggering corruption. It is the story of a global treasure hunt for missing billions that, to this day, remains one of the most compelling financial mysteries of the 21st century. To truly understand how Muammar Gaddafi built his financial empire, you have to go back to its very beginning, to a place far from the halls of power and international finance. He wasn't born into royalty or privilege. Muammar Gaddafi was born in a goatskin tent in the harsh Libyan desert near the coastal town of Sirte in 1942. He was the son of an itinerant Bedouin goat herder, and his family was illiterate and lived a nomadic life. His upbringing was modest, and as a schoolboy in the town of Sabha, he was reportedly bullied for his Bedouin roots, an experience that friends later said only hardened his resolve and fueled his ambition. But this desert boy had ambitions that stretched far beyond the sands of Libya. As a young student, he became a fervent admirer of the Egyptian leader Gamal Abdel Nasser, a titan of pan-Arab nationalism who challenged Western colonial influence across the Middle East. Inspired by Nasser's powerful rhetoric broadcast from the Voice of the Arabs radio station in Cairo, a young Gaddafi grew obsessed with the idea of revolution. He looked at Libya's ruling monarchy, under the aging King Idris I, and saw a corrupt regime propped up by the West and allowing foreign companies to plunder Libya's recently discovered oil wealth, while the Libyan people remained largely in poverty. His path to power was the military. He briefly studied history at the University of Libya, but dropped out, seeing the armed forces as the only real vehicle for political change and upward mobility. In 1963, he enrolled in the Royal Military Academy in Benghazi, where he began to plant the seeds of his future. He formed a secret group of like-minded young officers from disenfranchised backgrounds, naming them the Free Officers Movement, a direct echo of Nasser's own revolutionary group. Driven by a potent mix of Arab nationalism and a burning desire to seize control of their nation's destiny, they plotted in secret for years, patiently waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment arrived on September 1st, 1969. While the elderly King Idris was abroad in Turkey for medical treatment, Gaddafi, then just a 27-year-old army captain, executed a swift and masterfully coordinated coup. The takeover was launched from Benghazi and was virtually bloodless. Within a few hours, the free officers had seized control of the government and key infrastructure across the country. His Revolutionary Command Council, RCC, immediately abolished the monarchy and declared the new Libyan Arab Republic. In a flash, the unknown boy from the desert became the absolute ruler of one of Africa's most oil-rich nations. He stood before his people not as a king or a president, but as the brotherly leader and guide of the revolution, a title he adopted to project populist leadership while masking an insatiable thirst for absolute power. The stage was now set for him to seize the one thing that would fuel his ambitions for the next 4 decades: oil. When Gaddafi seized power, Libya's vast oil industry was almost entirely in the hands of foreign companies. The nation sat atop Africa's largest proven oil reserves, but the profits were flowing overwhelmingly into the coffers of Western corporations. Gaddafi viewed this as a continuation of colonial exploitation and was determined to end it. Almost immediately, he put the world on notice. The old deals were off the table. This was a radical and confrontational move. Starting in 1970, he began systematically nationalizing the oil sector, taking control of production, marketing, and, most importantly, the revenue. He personally targeted powerful oil executives, demanding higher prices and a greater share of the revenues. His aggressive tactics sent shockwaves through the global energy market, but were incredibly effective. By forcing companies to agree to new terms, he secured an estimated $1 billion in extra revenue for Libya in the first year alone. By 1973, he decreed a 51% takeover of all foreign oil operations, giving his government majority control over its own resources. On the surface, this was a monumental victory for the Libyan people, and for a time many did see tangible benefits. With this massive influx of new cash, Gaddafi's government launched ambitious social programs. Healthcare and education became free for all citizens. Before Gaddafi, literacy rates were around 25%. Under his rule, that figure reportedly soared to over 83%. The government offered subsidies for housing, farming, and even grants for newlyweds to buy their first home. Per capita income skyrocketed, and by some measures Libya achieved one of the highest standards of living in Africa. But here is where the story takes a dark turn, and it is the absolute key to understanding his entire financial empire. The line between the wealth of the Libyan state and Gaddafi's personal wealth completely and deliberately dissolved. By nationalizing the nation's oil and consolidating power within his revolutionary command council, he had effectively turned the Central Bank of Libya and the National Oil Corporation into personal resources he could access at will. The oil revenue wasn't just funding social programs, it was being used to finance his lavish lifestyle, his global political ambitions, and a secret financial network designed to hide billions of dollars. While ordinary Libyans saw real improvements in their lives, this progress came at a steep and terrible price. All dissent was brutally crushed. Political freedom was non-existent. Gaddafi introduced his own political philosophy, outlined in the Green Book, and transformed the state into a jamahiriya, or state of the masses, which in reality was a system of absolute personal control. The social benefits were, in effect, tools of control, handed out to ensure loyalty and placate the population. The oil money that was supposed to belong to the Libyan people was being systematically siphoned off by the very man who claimed to be their savior. With absolute control over Libya's oil revenues, Muammar Gaddafi began to operate on a scale that is difficult to comprehend. He wasn't just a dictator, he was the CEO of an oil-rich nation, and he treated its vast assets as his personal property. His personal fortune swelled, and while the often cited $200 billion figure remains unverified, the amount of wealth that was eventually uncovered by international investigators is staggering. This wasn't simply cash sitting in a vault, it was a vast, complex and deliberately murky global empire of investments, luxury real estate, and hidden accounts spread across dozens of countries. To manage this clandestine financial operation, Gaddafi relied on a tight circle of fiercely loyal aides. At the center of this network was a man named Bashir Saleh Bashir, who became known as Gaddafi's banker. Bashir served as Gaddafi's chief of staff and, crucially, headed the Libya Africa Investment Portfolio, LAIP, a multi-billion-dollar state fund officially created to invest Libyan money across Africa. In reality, investigators believe the LAIP was one of the main vehicles Gaddafi used to funnel money for his own purposes, buying up hotels, mineral resources, and major companies for the financial benefit of the Gaddafi clan. The network was truly global. Investigations after his fall revealed that Gaddafi's money was stashed in over 35 countries on 4 continents. He owned a portfolio of prime luxury real estate in London, including Portman House, a massive retail and office complex on the famous Oxford Street. In Italy, a country with close economic ties to Libya, his regime held a 7.5% stake in the famed Juventus football club and had significant shares in the Italian bank Unicredit and the oil giant Eni. In 2006, Gaddafi created an even more sophisticated tool to manage and grow this wealth, the Libyan Investment Authority, LIA. This was a sovereign wealth fund, officially established to invest Libya's oil surplus for the benefit of future generations. At its peak, the LIA was reported to manage assets worth over $67 billion. But like every other institution in Gaddafi's Libya, the LIA was under his ultimate control. This fund made major investments around the world, including purchasing a 3% stake in Pearson, the parent company of the Financial Times newspaper. This complete fusion of state and personal funds is what makes tracking Gaddafi's exact net worth so incredibly difficult. While billions were invested in high-profile, publicly known companies, persistent legends and intelligence reports tell of enormous stashes of cash, gold bars, and diamonds hidden in secret locations. There are unverified but compelling stories of a private plane filled with $12.5 billion in cash smuggled to South Africa, and for years rumors have swirled about gold and diamonds hidden in warehouses around Johannesburg. It is known that just before his death in 2011, Gaddafi reportedly sold off approximately a fifth of Libya's official gold reserves, with the proceeds from that massive sale still largely unaccounted for. This vast hidden empire was meticulously built over 4 decades, a testament to Gaddafi's cunning and his complete disregard for the line between his own wallet and the nation he ruled. Section 4. The Pan-African King and the Gold Dinar. Gaddafi's ambitions were never just financial. He saw himself as a grand visionary leader, a natural successor to his hero Nasser, but on a continental scale. After feeling betrayed and let down by his Arab neighbors, he turned his focus and his billions south, rebranding himself as a champion of Pan-Africanism. He proceeded to pour Libya's oil wealth into the African continent, but his generosity always served his dual goals, furthering his grand vision and cementing his personal quest for power and influence. He famously styled himself as the King of Kings of Africa, and was a principal driving force behind the transformation of the old Organization of African Unity into the modern African Union, AU, in 2002. He audaciously called for a United States of Africa, complete with a single unified military, a Pan-African passport, and one government. His money was his primary tool of influence. He built mosques and luxury hotels across the continent and provided crucial financial support to various political movements, including Nelson Mandela's African National Congress. This support created a powerful network of African leaders who were indebted to him, bolstering his political power and giving him an outsized voice in continental affairs. Perhaps his most audacious and potentially world-changing plan was for a new Pan-African currency, the gold-backed dinar. In the late 2000s, Gaddafi began seriously proposing that African nations should adopt a single currency backed by gold to trade their vast natural resources like oil and minerals. This was a direct and open challenge to the global financial system, which is dominated by the US dollar, especially in the oil trade. Gaddafi argued that a gold-backed currency would finally free Africa from its economic dependence on the West. Libya reportedly had 143 tons of gold, valued at over $7 billion, ready to back this new currency. And the idea was beginning to gain traction among other African nations. This was seen as a direct threat to Western economic dominance. A private email from then US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, released years later, explicitly mentioned the gold dinar plan. Dated April 2, 2011, the email from advisor Sidney Blumenthal noted that Gaddafi's gold was intended to be used to establish a Pan-African currency, and that French intelligence had discovered this plan shortly before the military intervention against him began. The email even suggested this was a primary factor in French President Nicolas Sarkozy's decision to commit to the attack on Libya. Whether the gold dinar was a viable economic plan or a grandiose fantasy is debatable, but the idea itself was revolutionary. It represented Gaddafi's ultimate ambition to fundamentally shift the global balance of power, using Libya's enormous wealth as his weapon. Amidst the swirling stories of siphon billions, international intrigue and brutal repression, there is one project that stands as a tangible, monumental and largely positive legacy of the Gaddafi era, the Great Man-Made River. Hailed by Gaddafi himself as the eighth wonder of the world, it remains the largest and most ambitious irrigation project in human history. The idea was born from a simple yet profound challenge. Libya is over 90% desert. However, deep beneath the vast expanse of the Sahara lay the Nubian sandstone aquifer system, an ancient and massive reservoir of fresh fossil water. In the 1950s, oil companies stumbled upon this incredible resource, and when Gaddafi came to power, he saw an opportunity to make the desert bloom. The plan he greenlit was breathtaking in its scale and ambition. To pump this ancient water from deep in the desert and transport it through a colossal network of underground pipes to the coastal cities where the majority of Libyans lived. Construction began in 1984, a gargantuan undertaking that would eventually involve laying nearly 4,000 kilometers of massive, pre-stressed concrete pipes. What was particularly remarkable about the project was its financing. At a time when many developing nations take on crippling foreign debt for major infrastructure projects, Gaddafi funded the entire $25 to $30 billion river with Libya's own oil revenue, making it a powerful symbol of his vision for Libyan self-sufficiency. By the early 2000s, the river was delivering millions of cubic meters of fresh water daily to cities like Tripoli and Benghazi, transforming urban life and making widespread agriculture possible for the first time. It provided 70% of all fresh water used in Libya. But the river's story also reflects the deep tragedy of modern Libya. The project was only about 3/5 complete when the 2011 revolution erupted. During the NATO-led military intervention, a key factory in Brega that manufactured the specialized pipes was bombed. NATO claimed the facility was being used as a military storage depot for rocket launchers. In the chaotic years of civil war that have followed, the entire project has suffered from neglect, lack of maintenance and damage, with rival militias at times weaponizing the water flow by seizing control stations. Today, the Great Man-Made River stands as both a monumental achievement that still supplies most of the country's water and a grand, unfinished dream, a tragic symbol of a nation's broken promise. By early 2011, the revolutionary wave of the Arab Spring, which had already toppled regimes in neighboring Tunisia and Egypt, arrived in Libya. Decades of simmering resentment against Gaddafi's oppressive rule, endemic corruption, and the squandering of national wealth finally boiled over. Protests erupted in the eastern city of Benghazi and quickly spread across the country. Gaddafi's response was swift and horrifically brutal as he unleashed his military forces against his own people, vowing in a famous speech to hunt down the rats and cockroaches inch by inch, house by house. The escalating violence plunged the country into a full-blown civil war, and the international community, which had once cautiously welcomed Gaddafi back into the fold, turned on him decisively. Citing the need to protect civilians from a potential massacre, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 1973, authorizing a military intervention. A NATO-led coalition began a campaign of airstrikes against Gaddafi's forces, providing critical air support that tipped the balance of the war in favor of the rebel factions. As his 42-year regime crumbled around him, Gaddafi fled and went into hiding. On October 20th, 2011, he was discovered by rebel fighters hiding in a large drainage pipe near his hometown of Sirte. The self-proclaimed King of Kings of Africa was captured, brutalized and killed, bringing his long and tumultuous rule to a bloody end. But the story of his money was just beginning. A global treasure hunt of unprecedented scale ensued. Western governments moved quickly to locate and freeze Libyan state assets. The Obama administration alone was stunned to freeze $37 billion in Libyan funds in the US. Worldwide, the total of frozen assets quickly grew to an estimated $100 billion. But Libyan officials and international investigators believed the true figure, including all the hidden wealth, cash and gold, could be much higher, perhaps even double that amount. The hunt for the missing billions has been a story of frustration, danger and intrigue. The new Libyan government at one point offered a 10% finder's fee, sparking a ruthless race among money hunters, intelligence operatives and mercenaries to find the hidden caches. The trail often leads back to Gaddafi's banker, Bashir Saleh Bashir. Despite an Interpol red notice for his arrest on fraud charges, Bashir has been seen living and traveling freely, particularly in South Africa, fueling widespread speculation that he holds the keys to unlocking the missing billions. Meanwhile, loopholes in international sanctions have allegedly allowed some of the money to slip away. A Politico investigation found that tens of millions of euros in interest payments from supposedly frozen funds in Belgium were being paid out to unknown beneficiaries. The fate of the Libyan investment authorities' roughly $70 billion in assets is also in limbo, largely frozen by the UN to prevent its misuse in the ongoing conflict that has torn Libya apart. The very chaos that has engulfed Libya since 2011 has made the search for the missing fortune nearly impossible, creating a perfect environment for the continued plunder of a nation's wealth. The story of Muammar Gaddafi's wealth is a dizzying and cautionary tale of absolute power, staggering corruption, and audacious ambition. He undeniably transformed Libya in some ways, using its oil wealth to fund massive nation-building projects like the Great Man-Made River. Yet he did so while creating a kleptocratic system that treated the entire national economy as his personal property, secretly amassing one of the largest and most mysterious fortunes in modern history. Today, Libya is a shadow of its former self. Before 2011, it had achieved one of Africa's highest standards of living, funded by its oil. Now, it is a fractured state, plagued by a seemingly endless civil war and failing infrastructure. For many Libyans suffering through the chaos, it is hard not to look back at the era of the mad African despot and wonder if, for all his profound faults, life was more stable and prosperous. The ultimate question remains unanswered. Where are the billions? Are they still hidden in a complex web of secret bank accounts, offshore trusts, and forgotten bunkers? Will they ever be located and returned to the Libyan people, or will they forever remain a ghost fortune, fueling conflict and intrigue around the globe? The legacy of Muammar Gaddafi is a deeply complex one. He was a revolutionary, a tyrant, a visionary, and a thief. But his most enduring legacy may be the colossal missing fortune that continues to haunt his broken nation and captivate the world. What do you think? Was Gaddafi a misunderstood revolutionary who genuinely tried to develop his nation, or was he simply one of the most successful and cunning thieves in history? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this investigation fascinating, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the hidden worlds of power and money.